In the early 70s, in a town called Amityville, the people that lived there had no idea what would eventually put them on the map. For almost 50 years now, true crime enthusiasts and horror movie lovers have flocked there, and today we're going to be talking about why. Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot his parents and 4 younger siblings sleeping and tried to pin it on the mob. Shortly after, his story would start to unravel, leading to his confession. But what pushed him to commit such a heinous crime? Well, he had a few different explanations for that. Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. I'm EspeciallyJessie and I do Sims 4 builds based on a true crime, conspiracy or a unique story. So if you're interested in any of that, consider subscribing. Today's story is one mixed with tragedy, horror and supernatural. We're going to be talking about the Amityville murders. But to understand what happened, we have to go back to the beginning. Just a little side note about the build, I tried to make it as close to the original house as I could. I wanted to avoid the movies, just because I think it's more authentic that way. Ronald DeFeo Sr., also known as Big Ronnie, was born on November 16, 1930. In his youth, he was known to be very athletic, handsome, and a great catch, which eventually caught the eye of his future wife, Louise. Louise Marie Brigante was born on November 3, 1931, to very Catholic parents. She had big dreams of becoming a model before meeting Ronald DeFeo in high school. Eventually, the two married in 1951, much to the disappointment of Louise's parents, but her father did end up hiring Ronald to work at his car dealership after the birth of their first child, Ronald DeFeo Jr., on September 26, 1951, who was nicknamed Butch. Their oldest son had it hard though. He was heavily abused by his father for all of his life. One minute he would hug his son, and the next he would throw him across the room, even in front of extended family members. Over the years, the DeFeos welcomed 3 more children: Dawn, born in 1956, Allison, born in 1961, and Mark, born in 1962. In 1963, Louise had finally had enough of the abuse her and Ronald Jr. had been dealing with, and decided to leave Ronald Sr., although it was a short separation, as Ronald Sr. wrote her a song and they were reunited. In 1965, Louise was pregnant again with their last child, John Matthew, and because their apartment was so small, they decided to move. The house on Ocean Avenue was built in 1927 and is Dutch colonial. The iconic eye windows are something that always fascinated people, although they have now been removed. Ronald Sr. and his family saw it as the perfect house for them. This house was a new beginning for the family. He put a sign out the front with the writing, "High Hopes." He also bought life-size paintings of the family, costing over $50,000. Through his younger years, Butch was bullied relentlessly for his weight. By the time he was a teenager, he had lost the weight, but the bullying continued. He turned to drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with the abuse at home and the bullying at school. He lashed out a lot at everyone and eventually was expelled from school. Ronald Sr. hired him at the car dealership doing random jobs. By the time he was 23, the abuse was still going and he was still working at the car dealership with his father, all up until the night of the 13th of November 1974. That night was like any other. Everyone was asleep soundly in their beds. Ronald DeFeo Jr. got out of his at 3 a.m, got his .35 caliber Marlin rifle. He headed to his parents' room first and shot his father and mother twice, continuing on to his siblings to do the same to them. He later said, "Once I started, I couldn't stop. It went so fast." All the murders were finished within 15 minutes. His reasoning for all the murders remains unclear, but he did talk about the devil telling him to do it. His siblings were just 18, 13, 12, and 9. After committing the murders, he showered, got dressed, collected the evidence, and threw them in a nearby storm drain, and then headed off to work. The people at the dealership wanted to know where Ronald Sr. was, but Butch pretended he had no idea, even making calls to the home to ask. He left work early to hang out with some friends and mentioned to them that he couldn't get in touch with his family. In the early evening, he ran to a nearby bar, screaming help, that someone had shot his family, and a few people came to help, but he refused to enter the home. Butch was interrogated soon after. They asked him if anyone would have any motive to kill his family, and he mentioned the mob, suggesting Ronald Sr. had ties with them. But soon the details were changing and they didn't add up. He swore he couldn't have done it as he'd been to work and with all his friends that day, but the bodies had been shot in early morning, well before he had to leave for work. By the next day, he had made a full confession. His criminal trial was in October 1975, almost 1 year after the murders took place. The prosecution didn't want to take any chances. They wanted to make sure a man like this wouldn't be a danger to society ever again. But Butch and his lawyers pled insanity and that it was self-defense, that if he hadn't killed his family, they would have done the same to him. Thankfully, the insanity plea didn't work, largely due to how well he had gotten rid of the evidence in the house, and he was sentenced to 6 counts of second-degree murder, and he spent his life in prison. Not long after, the house was sold to the Lutz family, George, Kathy, and their 3 children, but they weren't there long. They also bought all the DeFeo's furniture for a total of $400. They stayed a total of 28 days before fleeing the home, claiming it was haunted. They mentioned green slime oozing from the walls, windows shattering, and family levitating in their beds. In 1977, a book was written by Jay Anson based on the alleged hauntings, but meanwhile, Butch was making multiple escape attempts as he grew resentful of all the attention he was receiving in prison. Eventually, at the age of 69, Robert DeFeo Jr. died in prison on March 12, 2021, taking with him any real reasoning for the deaths of his family. The house has been sold and renovated many times since the Lutz family left, and no other hauntings have been recorded. So what do you think? Is the home haunted? And why did Ronald DeFeo Jr. commit these murders? Is it because of the abuse, his drug and alcohol use, or because of the demons he says told him to do it? Let me know in the comments below. But anyway, that's all I have for this case. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the build. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and if you have any suggestions for any future true crime cases, conspiracies, or unique stories, let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching.